Before dawn, snow buried the Northwoods in a silence deep enough to hide almost anything. Then a wounded mother dog scratched at the door of a man who had stopped answering the world. She was freezing, bleeding, and too weak to stand, but she refused the warmth inside. Instead, she turned toward the dark trees and begged Ethan Calloway to follow. What waited beneath a collapsed barn would force the grieving former Navy SEAL to choose between hiding and caring again. And before winter ended, one open door would begin changing more than a single life. Stay with this story and tell us where you are listening from today. Ethan Calloway lived at the end of a narrow road the county plow remembered only when it had run out of better things to love. His cabin stood on the edge of the Northwoods in northern Wisconsin, where the pines grew close and tall behind the house, and the frozen lake opened in front like a pale sheet of hammered glass. In daylight, winter could almost pass for mercy there. Snow softened the split-rail fence. Ice brightened the low branches. Moonlight turned the drifts silver, as if the whole world had been covered by a clean white cloth before anyone could notice what lay broken underneath. Inside Ethan's cabin, winter had never left. 3 years had passed since Lena and Abigail died on an icy county road south of town. 3 years since a sheriff's cruiser had come up that same narrow drive, its lights flashing red and blue against the trees. 3 years since Ethan had learned there were kinds of silence no military training could prepare a man to survive. He had survived anyway, though survival had become a small, stern thing. He repaired generators for men who paid in cash and did not ask questions. He split firewood until his shoulders burned. He patched roofs, cleaned chimneys, fixed frozen pipes, and accepted jars of venison stew from neighbors only when they left them on the porch, and drove away before he could refuse. He went into town for flour, coffee, lamp oil, dog-eared repair manuals, and nothing else. If anyone tried to say Lena's name gently, Ethan found a reason to look at the floor. He was 47 now, tall and broad-shouldered, but not in the polished way of a man who still belonged to a gym or a uniformed photograph. His strength had gone dry and practical. It lived in his hands, in the slope of his back when he lifted logs, in the quiet way he moved through bad weather as if arguing with it would only waste breath. His chestnut brown hair was cropped short without style, silver beginning at the temples, usually flattened by a wool cap. A close, graying beard shadowed his jaw. His nose had been broken long ago and had healed with a slight bend, giving his face the look of a man the world had once struck and failed to knock down completely. He often wore the same faded green camouflage field shirt and matching cargo pants, not out of pride, but because they were durable and already knew the shape of him. Over them, when the cold grew sharp, he wore an olive canvas jacket lined with wool. Around his wrist was a frayed green paracord bracelet Lena had braided years before from a length of his old survival cord. She had laughed while tying it on him, saying a man who could navigate by stars still needed help finding his way back to dinner. He had not taken it off since the funeral. On that night, the storm came down from the lake with a white, whispering force. Snow moved sideways through the dark. The pines behind the cabin leaned and hissed. The wind pushed against the windows as if trying to get inside and sit at the table. Ethan sat in the kitchen beneath a yellow lamp, repairing Lena's old wall clock. The clock had stopped 2 weeks after the accident. He had told himself he would fix it. Then he had told himself he did not have the right part. Then he had put it in a cupboard and let it stay there, face down among batteries, twine, and old cabinet hinges, as if time could be stored safely if a man did not look at it. That evening, for reasons he did not care to examine, he had taken it out. The back panel lay open on the table. Tiny screws rested in a jar lid. Beside them sat a mug of coffee, gone cold, and a pair of needle-nose pliers. The kitchen smelled of cedar smoke, machine oil, old wood, and the faint sweetness of the cinnamon sticks Lena used to keep in a cracked blue bowl near the stove. The bowl was still there. Empty now, but he had never been able to move it. Tick. He adjusted the gear. Tick. The sound was small, but in the lonely room it seemed almost rude. Alive things made noise without asking permission. Clocks, storms, old houses settling in the cold. A man could avoid town, avoid birthdays, avoid the church supper, avoid the frozen curve of road where flowers still appeared every December. He could not avoid sound. On the wall across from him hung a photograph of Lena and Abigail standing on the back porch in spring rain. Lena had one hand lifted as if scolding the sky for ruining her hair. Abigail, 24 and grinning, held a mug in both hands and wore one of Ethan's old Navy sweatshirts. She had always stolen his warmest clothes and then accused him of being dramatic when he noticed. "You look at the trees like you're waiting for them to report in," Abigail had once told him from that very porch. "They might," he had answered, "and what would they say?" "That you left your boots in the hall again." She had laughed so hard Lena had nearly spilled her tea. The memory rose without warning and filled the kitchen too completely. Ethan set the pliers down. His throat tightened, not suddenly, but with the familiar patience of old grief. It did not attack any more. It arrived, took off its coat, and sat beside him like a guest that had never learned when to leave. Then came the sound at the back door. A thin scrape. Ethan did not move. The storm had been throwing branches against the siding for hours. Ice made houses speak in winter. Snow sliding from the roof could sound like footsteps. A man living alone learned the language of ordinary noises because fear was an expensive habit and he had already paid enough. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. This time the sound was lower, closer to the threshold. Ethan lifted his head. The old part of him, the trained part, went still first. His eyes moved to the dark window over the sink. His hand found the heavy flashlight near the toolbox before his thoughts fully formed. He listened past the clock, past the stove's iron ticking, past the wind worrying at the eaves. A low whine slipped through the door. Not wood, not weather. Something living. Ethan stood. The chair legs dragged softly against the floorboards. He crossed the kitchen and stopped with one hand on the latch. For one strange second, he thought of the night the cruiser came, not because the sound was the same, it was nothing like it, but his body remembered being summoned by darkness, remembered a door opening, remembered cold air rushing in with news that could not be pushed back out. He closed his eyes. "No," he whispered, though he did not know whom he was refusing. The whine came again, thinner now. Ethan opened the door. Cold burst into the kitchen like a thrown bucket of knives. Snow swept over his boots and skittered across the floor. The porch light swung in the wind, and beneath it stood a German shepherd. She was a female, maybe 5 years old, though hardship had carved age into her posture. Her coat was yellow and black, but the colors were nearly hidden under crusted snow and ice. A dark saddle ran over her back like a torn cloak. Honey-colored fur showed at her chest and legs where the snow had not hardened. One ear stood tall, the other had a small rip along the upper edge. Her muzzle was black, her eyes amber, and fiercely awake. She should not have been standing. Her legs trembled so badly her nails clicked against the porch boards. Blood spotted the snow beneath her paws. Around her neck, the fur had worn thin in a raw, dark band, the mark of something tight that had lived there too long. Her ribs moved fast under her coat. Every breath seemed borrowed. Ethan stared at her, and the storm roared behind her as if outraged that she had made it this far. "Easy," he said. His voice came out rough. He had gone most of the day without using it. The dog did not step forward. She looked past him into the kitchen, toward the heat, toward the light, and then back over her shoulder at the dark woods. "No," Ethan said, softer this time. "Inside first." He reached for her. She flinched, not away exactly, but inward, as if the memory of a hand had struck before the hand arrived. Ethan stopped. Slowly he lowered himself to one knee, though the cold bit through his pants. He turned his palm upward. "Your choice," he murmured, the dog's amber eyes fixed on his face. She swayed once. For a moment pride seemed to hold her upright more than strength. Then her front legs buckled. Ethan caught her before she hit the boards. She was lighter than she should have been, too light for a shepherd her size. He felt the hard ridge of bone beneath wet fur, the violent shivering of a body trying to stay alive. She smelled of snow, old straw, fear, and something sourer underneath. Neglect, confinement, the stale misery of a place where no creature had been properly cared for. He lifted her across the threshold and kicked the door shut behind them. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around them, sudden and almost shocking. The dog collapsed onto the braided rug near the stove. Ethan grabbed towels from the shelf, filled a bowl with warm water, and knelt beside her. Meltwater ran from her coat in dirty rivulets. "Stay with me," he said. The dog lifted her head, not toward the water, not toward the stove, toward the door. Ethan frowned. "No, you're done out there." She struggled to rise. Her legs slid on the floor. She fell, scrambled, and pushed herself up again with a sound that was half growl, half sob. Then she barked. It was not loud at first. Her throat was too raw for that. But the bark carried a command inside it, sharp enough to cut through the storm and the old clock and the wall Ethan had built inside himself. He froze. The dog staggered to the back door and clawed at it. Once, twice. Then she turned and looked at him. That look unsettled him more than the blood on her paws. It was not the look of an animal asking for shelter. It was the look of a mother who had spent every last piece of herself getting to the only light she could find, and now could not understand why the man inside it was still standing there. Ethan backed away from the door. A strange anger rose in him, hot and unwelcome. Not at the dog, at the request, at the timing, at the snow, at the old god of winter, who seemed to enjoy sending broken things to his door and demanding he prove he still had hands. "I can't," he said. The dog barked again, and this time pain tore through it. The sound struck something buried in him. He saw, not the kitchen, but the icy road south of town. A curve where the guardrail bent. The red-blue pulse of emergency lights on snow. A deputy's mouth moving carefully. Lena's scarf in a sealed plastic bag. Abigail's phone cracked across the screen, still lighting up with messages from friends who did not yet know the world had changed. He had run that night too. He had run after the call, after the news, after the impossible hope that speed might bargain with death. He had arrived too late. Men like him were trained to enter storms, extract the wounded, hold pressure, carry weight, keep moving. No one had trained him for arriving after. The dog clawed at the door again. Ethan looked down at his wrist. The frayed green bracelet rested against his skin, dark with old oil and time. Lena's fingers had tied it there. Lena, who once stopped on a highway shoulder to move a turtle across the road while traffic honked behind her. Lena, who kept dog food in the trunk just in case hunger has 4 legs today. Lena, who had believed kindness was not a mood, but a duty that waited quietly for its turn. The German shepherd turned from the door and came toward him. She moved badly. Every step cost her. When she reached his boots, she lowered her head and placed one bleeding paw on the leather toe. Not heavy, not dramatic, just enough. A plea could have broken him. A command might have made him resist. But this was neither. It was trust offered before trust had been earned, and that was far worse. Ethan let out a breath that trembled. "You've got something out there," he said. The dog's ears shifted forward. He did not know how she understood tone, but she understood enough. Her body leaned toward the door again, and the look in her eyes changed. Not relief, not yet, but recognition. The way soldiers recognized movement after waiting too long in the dark. Ethan stood. His knees felt older than they had a minute ago. He moved quickly now because hesitation had become cruelty. He pulled on his olive canvas jacket over the faded green camouflage shirt, zipped it to his throat, and shoved his feet into his snow boots properly. He took his wool cap from the peg, grabbed the heavy flashlight, and checked the battery with one thumb. Then he slipped his phone into his pocket. The dog watched every movement, trembling. "Listen to me," Ethan said, pointing at her as if briefing someone who had no intention of following orders. "You fall over, I carry you. You don't get a vote." The German shepherd stared back. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan almost smiled. "Fine," he muttered. "You get a small vote." He opened the door. The storm rushed in again, filling the kitchen with white breath. The porch, the steps, the yard, the trees, everything shone under the moon and the snow, bright enough to look holy and cold enough to kill. The dog stepped out first. She swayed at the top of the stairs, then caught herself. Her torn ear flicked toward the woods behind the cabin. Ethan followed her gaze. Beyond the woodpile and the frozen rain barrel, a narrow path disappeared between the pines, a path he rarely used since Lena died because it led toward the old boundary fence, toward other people's land, toward a world that still asked things of him. The dog looked back once, amber eyes, snow on her muzzle, blood beneath one paw. A mother's terror held together by will. "All right," Ethan said. He pulled the door shut behind him, leaving the clock ticking in the kitchen and the yellow light burning in the window. Then Ethan Calloway followed the German shepherd into the white woods before dawn. Willow did not take Ethan to the road. That was the first thing he noticed, and the first thing he almost argued with. The county road curved around the north side of the property, then bent toward Pike Farm by way of a gravel lane that would be buried now beneath 2 feet of blown snow. It would have been safer in ordinary weather, wider at least, less crowded with roots and fallen branches. But Willow did not turn that way. She went straight past the woodpile, past the frozen rain barrel, past the little shed where Ethan kept spare pipe and old storm windows, and into the pines behind the cabin. There was a deer path there, nearly invisible under the snow. Ethan had not used it in years. Before the accident, Lena used to walk that path in autumn with a thermos of tea and a bag of stale bread for the neighbor's old mule, who had been dead longer than Ethan cared to count. Abigail had taken photographs there whenever frost made the spider webs look like tiny cathedrals. After they were gone, Ethan let the path close itself with brush and silence. Willow found it anyway. She moved with her nose low and her body tilted against the storm as if the wind were a door she had to shoulder open again and again. Snow clung to her black saddle and honey-colored legs. Every few steps, one paw slipped. Twice she struck her shoulder against a trunk and kept going without a sound. "Easy," Ethan called. The word vanished into the wind. He followed with the flashlight beam held low, searching for the safest footing. The light cut a narrow tunnel through the snow, catching bark, brush, the startled glitter of ice on branches. The world beyond the beam did not exist. There was only Willow's staggered path and the sound of Ethan's breathing inside his collar. 700 yards, he told himself. Maybe 800. He knew the land. Pike Farm bordered the back of his property, though the two places felt like different kingdoms. Ethan's cabin stood high and tight against the woods, built strong, repaired often, kept warm by a man who distrusted weakness in roofs and chimney seals. Pike Farm had sagged for years on the other side of the trees, its pastures sinking into scrub, its fences leaning like old men at a funeral. Willow stumbled again. This time she did not get up at once. Ethan reached her in 2 strides and knelt beside her. She lay half on her side, panting, steam rising from her muzzle. Her torn ear was flattened against her head. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead, deeper into the pines. "I said I'd carry you," he told her. He slid one arm under her chest. Willow made a raw sound and twisted away, not biting, not even threatening, just refusing. Her legs shook so hard they looked separate from her will, but she forced them beneath her body and stood. Ethan stared at her. Somewhere in that shivering animal was a command older than obedience, older than fear. Motherhood, he thought, was a countryman like him only visited from the border. Lena had known it differently. She had carried it in her hands, in her voice, in the way she could hear Abigail's mood from one word over the phone. Willow took 2 steps, then looked back, not asking him to understand, asking him to move. "Stubborn," Ethan muttered, rising. "Fine, but if you drop completely, I'm not holding a meeting about it." The dog turned forward again. A branch snapped somewhere to his left. Ethan swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing moved but snow. Still, his body tightened out of habit. The old reflex did not care that he was home, that no enemy watched from the trees, that the only mission now wore bleeding paws and a ripped ear. They pressed on. The pines thinned near the boundary fence. Ethan saw the first shape of Pike Farm through the storm. The crooked windmill, the dark square of the farmhouse, the long, low shadow of the old red barn. In the moonlit snow, the farm looked almost beautiful from a distance, the way ruin sometimes did before a man got close enough to smell it. Then the wind shifted. Rot, wet straw, old manure, and cold iron reached him under the clean scent of snow. Willow broke into a limping run. "Wait," Ethan said. She did not. He climbed through a gap in the broken fence after her. A strand of barbed wire snagged his jacket sleeve and scraped across the canvas with a dry whisper. He pulled free and followed her across the yard. The barn had collapsed on one side. Not entirely. That might have been simpler. The roof had given way in a cruel partial surrender, one heavy section caving inward while the rest still leaned over it, unstable and burdened with snow. Red boards had split outward. Sheets of corrugated tin curled like torn metal leaves. A beam jutted through the drift at an angle, black with age and wet at the break. Straw had spilled from the side wall and frozen into dirty clumps. Willow went straight to the fallen corner. She began to dig. Her paws struck wood, snow, straw, then wood again. She scraped with frantic force, blood marking the pale surface beneath her. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Ethan aimed the flashlight where she clawed. At first he heard only the storm, then something answered from underneath, a thin, muffled cry. Ethan went still. Not memory, not grief wearing another voice. A living cry, small enough that the wind nearly swallowed it. Willow dug harder, slipping, whining, biting at the edge of a board. "All right," Ethan said, though his mouth had gone dry. "I hear it." He took out his phone and tried to call Sheriff Audrey Bell. The screen glowed bright against the snow. One bar appeared, vanished, appeared again. The call failed before it could ring. "Come on," he breathed. He tried again. Nothing. For a moment he stood in the ruined yard holding the useless phone, anger rising in him like heat under ice. Law, property lines, Harlan Pike's name on county records, all of it crowded the edge of his mind. He was on another man's land. He had no warrant, no permission, no witness. A younger version of him would not have cared. An older version knew caring late could make trouble arrive early. The cry came again. weaker. The decision did not feel heroic. It felt like stepping onto a bridge already burning. Ethan switched on the phone camera. He swept it slowly across the scene, speaking over the wind. Pike Farm, Northeast Barn, roof collapse, injured female German Shepherd led me here from my property. Audible animal trapped under debris. Attempted call to Sheriff Audrey Bell at... He checked the time. 4:23 a.m. Call failed. Signal unreliable. I'm entering due to immediate risk of death. His own voice sounded too calm. That was training, not peace. He filmed the frozen water bowl near the wall, the rusted chain caught beneath a fallen beam, the disturbed straw where Willow had clawed. He filmed her paws, red against the snow. He filmed the gap beneath the slanted board, where the small cry had come from. Then he put the phone in his chest pocket with the camera still recording, grabbed the loose end of a broken fence rail, and used it as a lever. The first board did not move. Ethan adjusted his grip, planted his boots, and pushed. The rail creaked. Snow slid from the roof above him. He froze. The barn answered with a long wooden groan. Willow stopped digging and looked at him. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know." This was not a battlefield. It was worse in one particular way. Battlefields announced themselves. They had maps, orders, radio channels, men watching the same line. This was an old barn in a storm with a dog bleeding beside him and a life hidden somewhere beneath bad carpentry and neglect. No one was coming fast enough to take command. So Ethan made the circle smaller. One board, one breath, one sound. He cleared snow with his gloved hands, found a more stable beam, and tested it. The collapsed section had formed a pocket beneath the fallen roof, a narrow hollow where straw and an old burlap sack had trapped just enough air. If he pulled the wrong piece, the rest might shift. Willow tried to shove her muzzle into the gap. "No," Ethan said sharply. She ignored him. He caught her by the chest and pulled her back. She fought weakly, a terrible, desperate motion that made his stomach turn. "I know," he said, softer, holding her in place. "I know it's yours." The word yours changed something in him. Not the puppy, not the trapped animal. Yours. A mother's last country. Willow's body shook against his arms. For 1 second she stopped fighting. Her amber eyes stayed on the dark slit under the boards, but she allowed Ethan to hold her back. That tiny surrender hit him harder than any bark. She did not trust him because he deserved it. She trusted him because she had run out of choices, and sometimes the world handed a man trust in the ugliest wrapping it could find. Ethan released her slowly. "Give me room." Whether she understood the words or only the tone, Willow shifted aside by inches, trembling, watching every movement. Ethan wedged the fence rail beneath the slanted plank and pushed down. The plank lifted a little, not enough. He repositioned, found a smaller board pinning the lower edge, and kicked it loose. The gap widened. A smell came out first. Damp straw, animal waste, cold fear. Then he saw the puppy. It was a German Shepherd pup, 6 or 7 weeks old, though too thin beneath its soft black and gold fur. A narrow dark stripe ran down its back like a brushstroke. One ear had begun to lift, the other flopped sideways in defeat. Its front paws were too large for its body. One hind leg was caught beneath a strip of wood, not crushed, thank God, but pinned enough to hold it in the pocket. Its eyes were half open. Its mouth moved, but no sound came this time. Willow made a noise Ethan had never heard from an animal before, a broken, low moan that seemed to begin somewhere older than language. "I've got him," Ethan said. He took off one glove with his teeth and reached carefully into the hollow. The puppy's fur was icy near the surface, but warmer beneath, where the burlap had shielded him. Ethan felt for the pinned leg, lifted the strip of wood by an inch, then slid his hand under the pup's belly. The puppy stirred once, a small, offended twitch. "Good," Ethan whispered. "Be mad. Mad is alive." The barn groaned again. Ethan pulled. For 1 second the puppy caught on something unseen, and panic flashed clean through him. Not memory this time. Present fear. Immediate, useful, sharp. He shifted his wrist, lowered the pup's trapped leg, and eased him free. The puppy slid into his hands, limp and shivering. Willow surged forward. "Wait." Ethan turned his body to shield the puppy from her sudden movement, then lowered him just enough for Willow to touch him. She pressed her muzzle to the pup's face, licking snow and dirt from his nose. Her own legs buckled, but she held herself up long enough to count him with her breath. Nose to ear, nose to chest, nose to pinned leg. The puppy gave the faintest squeak. Willow's eyes closed, only for a second. But in that second, the ruined barn seemed to become something sacred and unbearable, an altar built of neglect, snow, and a mother who had refused to let winter finish its work. Ethan tucked the puppy inside his jacket, against the warmth of his chest and the faded camouflage shirt beneath. The pup was cold enough to make him flinch. Too cold. He zipped the jacket part way, leaving space for air. "We're leaving," he said. Before he turned, the flashlight beam caught the chain. It lay half under the fallen beam, one end fixed to an iron ring in the wall, the other end twisted open where the collapse had torn it loose. Beside it sat a metal food pan, empty except for frozen brown residue. The water bowl had frozen solid. Near the post, the wood was scratched deeply at dog height, gouged by weeks or months of paws trying to make a wall listen. Ethan filmed it again. He did not let himself speak this time. His breathing on the recording was enough. Then he saw the collar. A strip of cracked leather lay under the edge of the straw, still attached to 3 links of chain. It was stiff with cold, too small for the neck of a full-grown shepherd unless it had been tightened cruelly. A few yellow-black hairs clung to the inside. Willow watched him pick it up, her body lowered. Not guilt, not fear of being caught, fear of the object itself. Ethan put the collar into his jacket pocket. "All right," he said to her. "No more of that." The words were too simple for what he meant. No more chain, no more frozen bowl, no more doors that did not open, no more men using ruin as an excuse to become ruin for something weaker. Willow leaned toward the gap again, sniffing, searching. Ethan let her. She moved along the collapsed boards, nose working slowly despite exhaustion. She returned to the hollow where the puppy had been and nosed the straw. No other cry came. No other small body stirred beneath the boards. After a long moment, she turned back to Ethan, eyes fixed on the shape inside his jacket. Just one, he understood, one small life. The whole world reduced to a shivering weight against his ribs. "We go home," he said. The word home felt different when he said it with the puppy inside his coat and Willow swaying beside him, then took one step toward the fence. Willow tried to follow and nearly fell flat. This time, when he slid an arm under her body, she resisted only for a moment. Her pride was still there, bright and foolish and magnificent, but her strength had reached the bottom of itself. "I warned you," Ethan said. He could not carry both her and the puppy properly, not across the whole path in deep snow. So he did the next possible thing. He kept the pup tucked inside his jacket with one arm pressed gently over him. With the other, he supported Willow under the chest and shoulder, taking enough of her weight that she could move without collapsing. They crossed the yard slowly. At the fence gap, Willow stopped and looked back. Pike Farm stood behind them, bent under white silence. The broken barn crouched in the storm. The old windmill turned once in a gust, not fully, just a brief metallic shudder, as if the place itself he'd tried to speak and forgotten how. Ethan followed Willow's gaze. He had known Harlan Pike by sight for years. A man with a red face, a failing farm, and a temper people stepped around in town. Ethan had done what most people did with failing men who smelled of whiskey and trouble. He had kept his distance and called it wisdom. The puppy moved against his chest, a faint push of life. Ethan looked away from the barn. Not now, he told himself. Anger later, warmth first. The path back seemed longer. The storm had begun to thicken again, filling their tracks almost as soon as they made them. Willow stumbled every dozen steps. Ethan's injured shoulder, an old service complaint that disliked cold, started to burn. The puppy made no sound for several minutes, and each silence stretched Ethan's nerves tighter. He bent his head once, trying to feel breath through the layers. There. Maybe. He pressed the pup closer. "Stay with me," he murmured. Willow heard his voice and looked up. Her torn ear flicked. She bumped his thigh weakly with her shoulder. Not comfort, not exactly, but some kind of answer. They moved like that through the pines. A man who had spent 3 years avoiding the world, a mother dog who had crossed one storm and now surrendered pieces of her weight to him, and a puppy hidden inside a military jacket, as if one human heartbeat might serve as a borrowed hearth. When the trees opened at last, Ethan saw the cabin. Yellow light filled the kitchen window. Snow swirled through the beam from the porch lamp. Smoke bent low from the chimney, then lifted. The house looked small against the white woods, but warm. Waiting. Not a fortress now. Not a grave with a roof. For the first time since Lena and Abigail died, Ethan saw his cabin the way something lost might see it. A place where a door had opened. Willow saw it too. Her pace changed. Not faster. She had no faster left, but straighter, as if the sight of light had put one final command into her bones. "Almost," Ethan said. At the porch steps, Willow fell. Ethan caught her before her chest struck the wood. The puppy stirred inside his jacket and gave one thin, furious squeak, the sound of a tiny creature deeply offended by the weather, the world, and possibly Ethan's heartbeat. Ethan let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "All right," he said, climbing the steps with Willow leaning hard against him. "You're allowed to complain." He opened the back door with his elbow. Heat met them. The clock ticked from the kitchen wall where he had left it unfinished on the table. Snow slid from Ethan's boots onto the floor. Willow crossed the threshold, took 3 unsteady steps toward the stove, and sank down onto the rug. Ethan closed the door against the storm. Then he unzipped his jacket and lifted the puppy into the light. The puppy looked smaller in the light. Outside, in the broken barn, with snow flying sideways and Willow bleeding beside him, Ethan had not had room to understand the size of what he carried. Survival had narrowed everything to hands, breath, distance, heat. But now, under the yellow kitchen lamp, the young German shepherd in his palms seemed impossibly slight, all damp fur and fragile ribs and paws too large for the rest of him. The puppy's body gave one weak shiver. Then nothing. Ethan stood in the kitchen for half a second too long. Willow lay on the braided rug near the stove, sides heaving, her sable back and honey-colored legs darkened by melting ice. Her torn ear had folded sideways. Blood marked the floor where her paws had dragged across the boards. Still, she lifted her head and stared at the puppy with such fierce concentration that Ethan felt accused by the silence. "Right," he said, mostly to himself. "Warmth, not too fast." His voice steadied him. He moved. The cabin stopped being a shrine and became a workroom. Ethan pulled old wool blankets from the cedar chest beneath the window. He shoved magazines off a low wooden crate, lined it with one of his sweaters, and set it near the stove, but not against it. He remembered enough field medicine to know that heat could harm if it came too quickly to a body that had gone cold. He filled a bowl with warm water, not hot. He grabbed towels from the laundry shelf, then another shirt, then a thick pair of socks, because his mind had begun sorting every object by whether it could hold warmth. The puppy made no sound when Ethan lowered him into the crate. That frightened him more than crying would have. Willow tried to crawl toward the crate. Her front legs moved first, then failed. She pushed again, chin low, nails scraping the rug. "No," Ethan said. "Stay." The word sounded too sharp, too much like an order barked at a subordinate. Willow flinched. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment and swallowed. "Sorry," he said, softer. "Not like that." He dragged the crate close enough for Willow to see inside. The dog's amber eyes followed every inch. When the crate stopped, she stretched her neck and touched her nose to the puppy's side. The young one stirred barely. Willow gave a low, broken whine and tried to curl herself around the crate, though her own body trembled so violently the blanket beneath her shifted. Ethan knelt between them, one hand hovering uselessly over the puppy. He had handled bleeding men in worse weather. He had tied tourniquets with numb fingers. He had braced injured shoulders, cleared airways, counted seconds while rotors hammered overhead. He had been praised once for staying calm while other men shouted. None of that helped him now. This was not a soldier with a pulse he could find at the neck. This was a puppy smaller than a loaf of bread, with a stripe of black along his back and one ridiculous ear lying flat against his head. Ethan rubbed the pup's chest gently with 2 fingers. The skin under the fur felt cold, but not gone. Not yet. "Come on," Ethan whispered. "You made it this far." The puppy's mouth opened. No sound came out. Ethan's phone buzzed once in his pocket. Signal. He nearly dropped it, pulling it free. The screen showed 2 bars, then 1, then 2 again. He did not waste time trying the sheriff first. The puppy needed a veterinarian before he needed a report. He scrolled through old contacts until he found a number he had not used in nearly 2 years. Mara Kessler, Mobile Veterinary Care. He pressed call. It rang 3 times. 4. A woman answered with a voice that sounded half buried under sleep and entirely ready to be irritated. "If this is about a goat in labor, I have retired emotionally from goats." "Mara, it's Ethan Calloway." The line changed, not loudly, just the quiet shift of a person sitting up. "Ethan?" she said. "Are you hurt?" "No. Dog is. 2 dogs. Shepherd mother, severe exposure. Puppy, maybe 6 or 7 weeks, trapped in a collapsed barn. Cold, weak breathing. I have them inside." A drawer opened on her end. Something metal clattered. "How long cold?" "I don't know." That answer is terrible, but common. Her voice sharpened as sleep left it. "Keep the puppy warm gradually. Near heat, not on heat. Dry fabric. Rub gently. If gums are pale or gray, tell me. Is the mother conscious?" Ethan looked at Willow. She was watching him as if she knew judgment sat inside the small black rectangle in his hand. "Yes." "Good. Do not force food. Small amounts of lukewarm water only if she wants it. Any seizures? Bleeding?" Pause. "Collar injury. Bruising, I think." A pause. "What collar injury?" "Old, around the neck. Bad." The pause deepened. "I'm coming," Mara said. "The road's buried. I own a truck and poor decision-making skills. Put on coffee if your machine still remembers civilization." The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone. Willow had not taken her eyes off him. "She's coming," he told her. The dog did not understand the sentence, but perhaps she understood that his tone no longer stood alone in the room. Help had been summoned. The fortress had sent a signal. Ethan returned to the crate. The puppy's gums were pale but not gray. He rubbed the little chest in slow circles, then dried the ears, the paws, the belly. Willow's nose followed his hand each time. Once, when he moved too quickly, a low growl rose from her throat. Ethan stopped. The room stilled with him. He looked at her, not challenging, not scolding. "I'm moving the towel," he said. He did it slowly, showing her the cloth before he touched the puppy. Willow watched. Her lip lowered. Something quiet shifted then, not trust exactly. Trust would have been too generous a word. It was more like a narrow bridge built from necessity and exhaustion. Ethan crossed it carefully. He began narrating every movement. New towel. Checking his paw. Not taking him. Just warming him. The words were for Willow, but they worked on him too. Each small explanation pinned him to the present. No icy road, no cruiser lights, no deputy's mouth forming impossible sentences. Only towel, paw, breath, warmth. After 20 minutes, the puppy made a sound. Tiny. Hoarse. Offended. Ethan froze, then bowed his head over the crate. Willow answered with a whine so soft it nearly vanished beneath the stove's iron ticking. "All right," Ethan whispered. "There you are." The puppy's one half-lifted ear twitched. He nudged blindly against the sweater, searching for heat that was not there. Willow struggled again, trying to reach him. This time Ethan did not stop her immediately. He dragged the crate closer and slid one side of the sweater aside. Willow pressed her muzzle in, licking the pup's head with slow, careful strokes. Her tongue shook, her whole body shook, but the puppy pushed toward her breath. The kitchen seemed to inhale, not dramatically, not like a miracle in a painting, more like an old house discovering, after years of holding its breath, that air could still move through it. Headlights washed across the front windows 40 minutes later. Willow's body changed before Ethan heard the engine. Her head lifted. Her shoulders stiffened. A growl gathered low in her chest. "It's the vet," Ethan said. That did not calm her. He stood and went to the door before Mara could knock. Snow blew in around a woman in a dark teal waterproof coat, black rubber snow boots, and a wine-red scarf wrapped twice around her neck. Her brown copper hair had been shoved into a low knot and was losing the battle strand by strand. She carried a brown leather medical bag that looked older than some barns and twice as stubborn. Mara Kessler stepped inside, stamped snow off her boots, and looked at the towels, the crate, the bleeding shepherd, the half-repaired clock on the table, and Ethan in his soaked camouflage shirt. "I hope," she said, "you understand that dish towels are not technically medical equipment." Ethan looked at the heap of towels around the crate. They were clean. That is a brave opening argument. The corner of his mouth moved before he could stop it. Not quite a smile, but Mara noticed. She had the decency not to celebrate. She crossed the kitchen slowly, already changing as she approached Willow. The dry humor remained in the air behind her, but her hands became quiet. Her shoulders lowered. Her steps softened. She crouched several feet from Willow and set the bag on the floor, then opened it without reaching toward the dog. "Hello, Mama," Mara said. "You look like you made several poor choices for excellent reasons." Willow growled. Mara nodded. "Fair." She pulled out a stethoscope and laid it on the floor where Willow could see it. Then a thermometer. Then gauze. She did not crowd. She let the dog watch the tools arrive one by one as if introducing guests at a tense dinner. Ethan stood near the stove, feeling unnecessary and also unwilling to move away. "Her name?" Mara asked. "I don't know." Mara glanced up. "Then what have you been calling her?" Ethan hesitated. He had not named her. Naming felt like claiming, and claiming felt dangerous. But in the last hour, the dog had become more than the shepherd, and more than the mother. He thought of the way she had come through the pines, thin and shaking, bending but not broken. A willow in winter, bowed under ice and still rooted. "Willow," he said. The dog's ear flicked. Mara saw it. "Willow it is." She turned her attention to the puppy. And this dramatic little object? No name. The puppy gave another faint squeak, as if offended by the administrative delay. Mara leaned over the crate. "He has opinions." "That's useful." She examined him first with her eyes, then her hands. Ethan watched her fingers move with practical gentleness, checking the pup's mouth, ribs, leg, belly. The puppy trembled, but did not cry much. Mara's face stayed calm, though the line of her mouth tightened when she felt the cold in him. "Hypothermic," she said, "but not beyond us. Leg bruised, not broken from what I can tell. We keep him warm, get small amounts of fluid in when he can tolerate it, and watch him like he owes us rent." Ethan let out a breath. "Don't relax yet," Mara said. "I said not beyond us. That is not the same as easy." Then she moved to Willow. That was harder. Willow allowed Mara near the puppy only because Ethan kept one hand on the crate and spoke before each movement. But when Mara reached toward her neck, Willow's body went rigid. Mara stopped at once. "Old collar mark," Ethan said. "I found a collar in the barn. Chain, too." Mara's eyes sharpened. "You have it?" "In my jacket pocket." "Good, don't clean it. I wasn't planning to polish it. Grief does strange things to men. Evidence does not appreciate tidying." He looked at her. She did not smile this time. Slowly, with Ethan beside her and Willow watching both of them, Mara parted the fur around the dog's neck. The raw band beneath made her go very still. It was not the look of someone shocked by cruelty. It was worse, the look of someone who recognized a pattern. "This didn't happen tonight," she said. "No." "Not last week either." "No." Mara checked Willow's gums, temperature, paws, ribs. Bruises hid beneath the thick coat, but not well enough. There were old scabs near one shoulder. One nail had split from digging. The pads were torn from ice and hard travel. "She's dehydrated," Mara said. "Undernourished. Exposure. Old restraint injury. Possible repeated trauma." She looked toward the crate. And she still went out for him. Willow had dragged herself close enough to rest her muzzle against the crate's edge. The puppy pushed clumsily toward her nose. Ethan looked away first. Mara noticed that, too. She gave Willow a small amount of lukewarm water. The dog drank a little, then stopped and checked the puppy again. Mara wrapped her paws, cleaned the worst of the blood, and gave instructions in a tone that expected obedience from both species. "No food yet. Tiny water. Keep her warm but not overheated. Puppy gets monitored every 15 minutes until his temperature comes up. I'm leaving you a warming pad, but we use it under layers, not directly. If he fades, you call me before you panic." "I don't panic." Mara looked around the kitchen, at the towels, the wet floor, the clock parts, the old sweater in the crate, Ethan's stiff posture. "No," she said. "You weaponize concern." He almost objected. Then the puppy shoved his face into the fold of the sweater and released a tiny grunt of outrage. Mara looked down. "That one needs a name before he starts filing complaints." Ethan studied the narrow dark stripe along the puppy's back, the way one ear made a brave attempt at standing while the other surrendered to gravity. "Finn?" he said. "Because?" "I don't know." Mara's eyebrow lifted. He did know a little. Abigail had once named a paper boat Finn because she said anything that crossed puddles needed a sea name. The memory arrived gently this time, not as a blade, but as a hand laid briefly on his shoulder. "Just Finn," Ethan said. Mara nodded, as if she understood enough not to ask. The house settled around the name. Willow's nose touched the puppy's head. Finn squeaked again, clearer this time. Mara began packing some of her tools, but left others on the table. thermometer, gauze, notes, a small bottle for fluids. Then her eyes moved to Ethan's phone. "You recorded the barn?" "Yes." "You called Audrey?" "Tried. No signal." "Good. Keep the failed call log. Keep the video. Keep the collar. Keep any bloody towels from her paws. And don't wash the jacket if there's transfer from the barn." Ethan stared at her. Mara snapped the bag partly closed. "Ethan, if Harlan Pike owns her on paper, good intentions will not be enough." The name entered the room like cold under a door. Willow lifted her head. "You know she's from Pike Farm?" Ethan asked. "I suspected. People have mentioned a shepherd out there. Thin, sometimes chained, near the old barn." Mara's jaw worked once. "Mentioned, not reported. There is a difference, and it matters." Ethan felt the heat rise in his chest. "Then we go back." "No." He looked at her sharply. Mara stood, shorter than him, but unmoved by the difference. "You do not go back half-frozen, angry, and legally muddy. You call Sheriff Audrey as soon as the signal holds. You call Animal Control. You send the video. You let me document injuries. You let the process build a wall Harlan can't kick down." He left them there. Probably. Probably? I believe he did. The law will ask me what I can prove. Ethan hated the sentence because it was true. Truth spoken in practical language often sounded like cowardice at first. He had spent years trusting action more than procedure, but Finn lay in a crate because Ethan had acted. Willow lay beside him because no procedure had reached her in time. Still, Mara was right about one thing. If Ethan charged ahead and made this about his anger, Harlan might get exactly the opening he needed. Ethan looked at Willow. The dog had lowered her head beside Finn, eyes half shut, body still trembling, but no longer alone in the cold. Her trust, if it could be called that, had not been given to his rage. It had been given to his hands. "All right," Ethan said. Mara's expression softened by a fraction. That sounded painful. It was. Good. Growth often lacks charm. She gathered her scarf, then paused near the kitchen table. Her gaze had landed on the wall photograph of Lena and Abigail, then on the half-repaired clock beneath it. For a moment, the brisk veterinarian faded, and in her place stood a woman who remembered something. "I met Lena once, Mara said. Ethan went still. Mara did not rush to fill the silence. That was kind of her, or wise. "At a feed drive," she continued, "years ago. She showed up with 2 bags of dog food, a box of blankets, and a trunk full of those little snack packs strays pretend they're too dignified to want." Ethan looked at the blue bowl near the stove. "She used to keep food in the car," he said. "I know. She told me she liked to be prepared in case hunger had 4 legs that day." The words entered him quietly. No crash, no wound opening. Just a small door somewhere in the mind, swinging on hinges he had forgotten to oil. Mara looked at Willow and Finn. Seems she had a habit of being early to the work. Ethan did not answer. He could not. Mara buttoned her coat. "I'll check back after first light if the roads cooperate. Call Audrey. Call Animal Control. And Ethan?" He looked at her. "Don't turn this house into a bunker with dogs in it. They need care, not a siege." After she left, the cabin felt larger for a moment, then fuller. The storm softened outside. Snow brushed the windows in pale sheets. The stove burned low and steady. Ethan sent the videos to Sheriff Audrey Bell when the signal allowed, then left a message with Animal Control exactly as Mara instructed. He set the collar in a paper bag, labeled it with the time and place because Nora Bell, whoever answered that office in the morning, deserved facts instead of fury. Then he sat on the floor beside the crate. Willow watched him, but her eyes no longer burned with the same sharp panic. She still guarded Finn. She still measured every movement. Yet when Ethan reached slowly to adjust the blanket near the puppy, she did not growl. He spoke before touching it anyway. Just the blanket. Finn had warmed enough to complain more regularly. His complaints were tiny and unimpressive, but in the old cabin they sounded almost royal. Ethan leaned back against the lower cabinet, exhausted down to the bone. The wall clock remained open on the table, its pieces scattered in the lamplight. It had not been repaired. It ticked only when Ethan touched the gear. Still, for the first time in years, time did not feel like an enemy crossing the room. Willow sighed. Finn made a small sound and pressed his nose into his mother's fur. Ethan looked at the photograph of Lena and Abigail, then at the blue bowl, then at the living creatures on his floor. The cabin no longer held only what had been taken from him. It held breath, messy, fragile, inconvenient breath. And Ethan Calloway, who had once mistaken silence for survival, stayed awake beside it until the dark outside began, slowly to thin. Morning did not arrive with mercy. It arrived with evidence. The storm had weakened by dawn, leaving the Northwoods bright and stunned beneath a hard blue sky. Snow lay over Ethan Calloway's roof in thick, clean slabs. It balanced on the split-rail fence, softened the woodpile, and shone on the frozen lake with a glare that made the world look newly made. If a man did not know where to look, Ethan knew where to look now. He stood in his kitchen with his hands around a mug he had not drunk from, watching Willow and Finn near the stove. The puppy had survived the night, though not with grace. Finn complained whenever Ethan touched him, whenever the blanket moved, whenever existence failed to provide milk at the speed he preferred. His narrow black stripe had dried into a crooked line down his small back. One ear still tried to rise. The other had resigned itself to comedy. Willow lay curved around him, her yellow-black coat brushed as dry as Ethan could manage, her torn ear angled toward every sound in the house. She had accepted water, a little at a time. She had accepted Mara's medicine with the expression of a queen tolerating poor court manners. But she did not sleep deeply. Each time a branch dropped snow outside, her head lifted. Mara Kessler arrived again just after sunrise, looking less like a visitor than a woman who had been drafted by fate and intended to file a complaint later. Her teal coat was zipped to her chin, copper-brown hair tucked under a knit cap, medical bag in one hand, travel mug in the other. "Good," she said after checking Finn's temperature. "Still rude? Rude is promising." Ethan looked down at the puppy, who had latched weakly against Willow and was pawing at the blanket with unreasonable ambition. He almost looked stronger. He is stronger. Almost as for men afraid of hope. Before Ethan could answer, tires crunched outside. Sheriff Audrey Bell came first, stepping from her cruiser in a brown sheriff's parka dusted with snow, dark hair cut short beneath a black knit cap. She carried no drama with her. Audrey was compact, steady, and built of the kind of calm that made shouting feel childish. A scratched steel thermos hung from one hand. Her eyes moved from Ethan's face to the window, then to the floor, as if the entire morning had already begun giving testimony. Behind her came a white county truck with orange reflective stripes along the side. The woman who climbed out of it wore a navy animal control jacket with reflective bands, black gloves clipped to her belt, and a low ponytail tucked into her collar. She was younger than Audrey, maybe late 30s, with quick brown eyes and the clean, narrow focus of someone who believed the world became less cruel when facts were pinned down before they could run away. "Nora Bell," Audrey said when they entered the kitchen. "Animal control." "No relation worth mentioning during business hours," Nora said, already looking toward Willow. Audrey took one glance at the dog and the puppy, and her jaw tightened, only for a second. Then the sheriff returned. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "I got your messages. Video came through in pieces, but enough." Willow lifted her head at the new voices. When Nora took one step closer, Willow's body stiffened around Finn. Nora stopped at once. "Not crowding her," Nora said. "I'll observe from here first." Ethan had expected sympathy. Perhaps that was why Nora irritated him almost immediately. She did not kneel and whisper apologies to Willow. She did not curse Harlan Pike. She asked for the time Ethan left the house, the route he took, whether he crossed posted fencing, whether the barn roof was actively unstable, whether he had moved any objects before recording. Ethan answered, then answered again when she asked him to clarify. By the sixth question, his patience began to crack. "She was freezing on my porch," he said. "The puppy was under a collapsed roof. I didn't stop to draft an affidavit." Nora looked up from her small black camera. "Good. You recorded instead. That may be why they don't go back." The words took some of the heat out of him, though not all. Mara, who had been rewrapping Willow's paw, did not look up. "She's building the legal fence, Ethan. Try not to kick it down because you dislike the lumber." Audrey made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been wearing a badge. Ethan looked away. Willow watched him from the rug, amber eyes steady. Finn made a small, greedy noise and pushed his head into her fur. The little sound steadied Ethan more than the coffee had. "Fine," he said. "Ask." Nora did. She photographed Willow's neck, paws, ribs, and Finn's bruised leg with Mara's help. She took Ethan's paper bag containing the cracked collar, but did not open it yet. She labeled it, sealed it, and wrote the time on the outside. She copied the failed call log from Ethan's phone. She watched the video from the barn twice without changing expression. Only once did her face shift. It happened when the video showed the empty frozen water bowl. Nora paused the screen, zoomed in, and stared. Then she looked toward Willow. "That bowl didn't freeze in an hour," she said quietly. No one answered. They all knew what she meant. By mid-morning, Ethan, Mara, Audrey, and Nora returned to Pike Farm. Willow and Finn stayed behind in the warm cabin. Ethan had not liked leaving them, but Mara had been firm. "You taking an injured mother dog back to the place she nearly died is not noble. It's theatrical. We are trying not to become idiots with good cheekbones." He had obeyed, mostly because Willow was too weak to argue for herself, and Finn had fallen asleep with his nose tucked under her chin. Pike Farm looked different in daylight. Not better, just less able to hide. The broken fence sagged beneath its white burden. The farmhouse windows were dark, one covered from inside with cardboard. The red barn leaned with its collapsed side exposed, boards split open like ribs. A windmill turned slowly in the faint breeze, creaking once per rotation, a tired metronome above ruin. Nora took charge without raising her voice. She measured the distance from the fence gap to the barn. She photographed Ethan's boot tracks from the night before, where snow had not covered them fully. She documented the chain still caught under the fallen beam, the iron ring in the wall, the gouges in the wood at dog height, the bedding made of old straw and burlap, the frozen pan with residue dried along one side. Audrey moved through the yard with a deputy's caution and a farmer's sadness, though Ethan doubted she had ever farmed anything larger than coffee. She scanned the house, the driveway, the outbuildings. Her boots left clean prints in the snow. "Harlan here?" Ethan asked. "Not at the house," Audrey said. "No fresh smoke. No fresh tire tracks after the storm." Convenient. Convenient is not a charge. He hated that, too. Nora crouched near the collapsed section of the barn and studied the chain. Anchor failed when the beam came down. That gave the adult dog a gap to get out. She pointed with her pen. Puppy pocket formed here, slanted board, burlap, straw, shielded from direct wind. That explains survival. "Does it explain leaving them here?" Ethan asked. Nora stood and looked at him. "No. That part will require people." The sentence stayed with him as they drove into town. People, Ethan had learned, were the hardest evidence to collect. Pine Hollow was not large enough to keep secrets well, but it was very good at keeping discomfort. The town sat under snow and sunlight with wreaths still on shop doors, a church steeple shining white, and plowed banks along the sidewalks high enough to make every street look like a trench. Smoke lifted from chimneys. Trucks idled outside the diner. The world had the nerve to look peaceful. Their first stop was Whitcomb Feed and Supply. A brass bell over the door rang when Audrey entered. The place smelled of grain, leather, dust, and wood shavings. Stacked bags of feed lined the walls beside salt blocks, fencing staples, buckets, gloves, and dog treats in cloudy jars near the counter. June Whitcomb stood behind the register with both hands wrapped around a red ledger book. She was a short, round woman in a thick pine green cardigan, silver blonde hair tucked under a cream knit hat, though she was indoors. Her face was kind in the weary way of people who had spent years remembering everyone's preferred brand of chicken feed and everyone's private troubles. When she saw Ethan behind Audrey, her mouth tightened. "I heard there was trouble at Pike's," June said. Audrey set her thermos on the counter. "We're asking about a German shepherd, female, yellow and black. Might have been kept out there." June's fingers pressed into the red ledger. Ethan saw it. A tiny movement. A door nearly closed. Mara saw it too. So did Nora. June looked toward the front window, where sunlight flashed off the snowbanks. "Farm dogs get thin in winter sometimes." Ethan's hands closed. Audrey did not look at him, but her voice became slightly sharper. "That wasn't the question." June swallowed. The red ledger opened with a reluctant whisper. She had records. Harlan Pike had bought the cheapest feed irregularly, sometimes going 5 or 6 weeks between purchases. He had bought a heavy chain the previous fall. He had bought no puppy food, no bedding, no proper collar. June had noticed because people in small towns noticed everything and admitted almost none of it. "I thought," June said, and then stopped. Ethan had never liked those words. They were where responsibility often went to hide. June tried again. "I thought maybe someone else was helping him, or maybe the dog was hunting, or maybe I was making it bigger than it was." Nora wrote without judgment. That somehow made June's shame more visible. "You saw the dog?" Audrey asked. "Once near his truck. Thin, real watchful." June's eyes grew wet. "I told myself working dogs look rough sometimes." Mara's voice was quiet. "Sometimes they do. Not like that." June nodded once, and her chin trembled. "I should have called." No one comforted her, not because they were cruel, because some truths needed to sit upright for a while before anyone tried to soften them. Their next stop was Tom Riley's place, a small gray house 1/2 mile from Pike Farm, with a workshop attached and neat stacks of lumber under a tarp. Tom met them in the yard wearing a brown work coat dusted with sawdust and snow. He was thin, 61, with a long face, blue-gray eyes, and hands so cracked and scarred they looked carved from old fence posts. A folding wooden ruler stuck from his chest pocket. When Audrey mentioned Willow, Tom looked down at his boots. That was answer enough. He had heard barking, he said. Not one night, many, especially late when Harlan came back from town drunk enough for his truck to wander the lane. Sometimes shouting followed. Once Tom heard a hard thud against the barn wall and a dog yelp. "Why didn't you call?" Ethan asked. The question came out flatter than he intended. Tom did not defend himself quickly. That counted for something. "Harlan's not gentle when crossed," Tom said, "and I told myself a dog barking on a farm wasn't proof of anything." Ethan looked toward Pike Farm's distant tree line. Was the yelp proof? Tom winced. Audrey said, "Mr. Riley?" Tom pulled the folding ruler from his pocket, opened it, closed it, opened it again. "I pulled the curtain. That's what I did." The wind moved over the yard. Ethan felt something inside him turn, not toward Tom exactly, but toward a larger shape. June had a ledger. Tom had a curtain. Someone else would have a joke made at the diner, a shrug at the gas station, a change of subject at church. No single act had broken Willow. But many small refusals had built the cold around her. And Ethan was not outside that circle. The realization came without warning, not as guilt's old hammer, but as a needle finding the seam. Months earlier, Harlan Pike had come to Ethan's cabin near dusk. Drunk, yes, but not stumbling. He had asked Ethan to look at a generator that kept failing at the farm. Ethan remembered the smell of whiskey, the red in Harlan's face, the way the man's voice had slipped between arrogance and pleading. Ethan had refused, not politely. He had told Harlan to call someone else. Then he had shut the door. At the time, he called it boundaries. Maybe it had been. Maybe Harlan would have been cruel whether the generator ran or not. But Ethan remembered a dog barking faintly from the truck bed that evening. He remembered hearing it after the door closed. He remembered turning up the radio so the sound would go away. The memory did not accuse him with lightning. It simply stood there, wearing work boots, waiting. Audrey was still speaking to Tom, but Ethan had stopped hearing the words. Mara came to stand beside him. She did not touch his arm. "What?" she asked quietly. "Harlan came to my place once. Generator trouble." "When?" "Fall." Mara's face did not change much, but her eyes did. "You couldn't know." "I didn't want to know." That was different. Mara looked toward Tom Riley, who was signing a statement with the shame of a man who had finally opened the curtain and disliked the view. "Then know now," she said. By late afternoon, Ethan's cabin felt too small for everything that had entered it. Willow slept uneasily beside Finn. Mara had returned with them to check the bandages and leave more supplies. Audrey had gone to file statements. Nora had taken the collar and copies of the video into county custody, promising updates with the warmth of a court form but the eyes of someone who had seen enough to care. Ethan was at the sink washing his hands for no reason when a sound cracked across the porch. A fist on wood. Once, twice. Then again, harder. Willow came awake with a violence that made Finn squeal. She surged to her feet, nearly falling, and placed herself between the crate and the back door. Her lips lifted, but the growl that came from her was low, breathless, old. Ethan knew before the voice came. "Calloway!" Harlan Pike stood outside, drunk enough to be loud and sober enough to aim his anger. His voice dragged across the wood like a rusty hook. "I know you got my dog in there." Mara, still in the kitchen, set one hand on her medical bag. Ethan stepped toward the door. Willow's growl deepened. Finn whimpered behind her. "Ethan," Mara said. He stopped with his hand inches from the latch. The old reflex rose clean and ready. Open the door. Control the threat. Put the body between danger and the vulnerable. Simple, primitive, satisfying. Harlan pounded again. "You broke onto my land, took what's mine. You hear me?" Ethan's hand closed around the latch. Behind him, Finn made a small sound, not fear exactly, but need. Willow turned her head just enough to look at Ethan. Her amber eyes were wide, not begging him to fight, not begging him to hide, asking him not to ruin the only safe path left. That struck harder than Harlan's fist. Ethan let go of the latch. He took one slow breath, then another. He pulled his phone from his pocket and pressed Audrey's number. Outside, Harlan shouted again, calling Willow property, calling Ethan a thief, calling the law a thing he would enjoy using once it finally showed up sober enough to count. Ethan looked at Willow standing over Finn on shaking legs. Protection, he understood, was not always a door flung open. Sometimes it was a door kept closed while a man swallowed the easy violence and chose the harder road. Audrey answered on the second ring. Ethan's voice was quiet when he spoke. "Sheriff, Harlan Pike is on my porch." Sheriff Audrey Bell arrived before Ethan opened the door. That was fortunate for Harlan Pike. The porch boards had taken 3 rounds of his fist by the time Audrey's cruiser turned into the drive, blue lights silent but bright against the late afternoon snow. Ethan stood inside with one hand still near the latch, the phone pressed to his ear, and Willow trembling behind him over Finn's crate. Harlan shouted again from the porch, "You hear me in there, Calloway? That dog is mine!" Willow's growl broke into a cough. Her legs shook, but she did not move away from the puppy. Finn, offended by the entire performance, made a thin little squeak from the crate, then shoved his nose under the blanket as if hoping the world might improve if he ignored it. Ethan lowered the phone. Outside, Audrey's car door opened. Boots crunched over packed snow. Her voice came through the storm-softened air, calm enough to be dangerous. "Harlan, step away from the door." A pause. Then Harlan laughed, rough and wet. "Evening, Sheriff. Didn't know theft got house calls now." Ethan looked through the small window beside the back door. Harlan Pike stood under the porch light in a red and black flannel coat, gone dark at the cuffs, a stained thermal shirt visible beneath it. His old cap sat crooked on graying blonde hair. He was 58, but looked both older and less finished than that, a big-framed man softened by drink and neglect. His eyes were pale blue, bloodshot, and too bright. A set of keys hung from a leather loop at his belt and clicked whenever he shifted his weight. The sound reached Willow, her body lowered. Not submission, memory. Ethan saw it and felt his own temper rise, like a match struck in a dry room. Audrey stepped between Harlan and the door. She was shorter than he was, but some people carried authority the way winter carried cold, without needing permission. "You were told Animal Control has an active hold pending review," Audrey said. "You do not come here to retrieve anything." "Active hold?" Harlan spat the words into the snow. "That's fancy for stealing a man's property." Property that was found hypothermic beside a collapsed barn. My barn, my land, my dog. Ethan opened the door then, not wide, just enough to stand in the frame, and let Audrey remain between them. Cold slid into the kitchen behind him. Willow growled once, hoarse and low. Harlan's gaze moved past Ethan immediately. He saw Willow near the stove, saw the crate, saw Finn's small dark striped back under the blanket. Something in his face twitched. Possession, not tenderness. "There," Harlan said, pointing. "You see? Right there. You got no right." Ethan's hand tightened on the doorframe. Audrey glanced back once, a warning without drama. Ethan understood it. He did not like it, but he understood it. "You had her chained in a barn with no water," Ethan said. "You don't know a damn thing about my place. I saw the bowl frozen solid. It was a storm. I saw the collar. She chews things. Dogs do that. I saw the puppy under a roof that had fallen in." Harlan's face reddened deeper. "Because you were trespassing." The word hung there, ugly but not useless. Harlan knew where to put a blade. Audrey shifted. "Mr. Pike, this conversation is being documented. I suggest you remember that." "Good. Document it." Harlan spread his arms, nearly slipping on the snowy porch. "Document that a washed-up soldier broke onto my farm, damaged my barn, and took my animals. Document that everybody in this town minds their business until there's a chance to feel holy." For a moment, something in him stopped performing. Only for a moment. But Ethan saw it, the ruin beneath the rage. Harlan's coat was not enough for the cold. His hands were cracked and swollen. His boots were cheap rubber, split near one toe. He smelled of whiskey, yes, but also of old hay, unpaid bills, and a life that had gone sour in its own walls. "My wife left 6 years ago," Harlan said suddenly, as if the porch had become a courtroom and grief had agreed to testify for the defense. "Took the good truck, took the savings, took the phone numbers of every friend who used to answer me. Bank took the south pasture, weather took the hay roof. Men I'd known 20 years crossed the street so they wouldn't have to hear me ask for work." He looked at Ethan then, hard. "Don't stand there in your warm house talking to me like pain makes you special." Ethan did not answer quickly, because that one struck somewhere true. He knew what it was to stand in a house that had become too large for the living. He knew how easily a man could turn silence into furniture and bitterness into a religion. He knew how the world kept asking normal things from people whose lives had split open, but Willow had a raw band around her neck. Finn had nearly died beneath rotten boards. Understanding a wound did not require kneeling before what the wounded man had done with it. "No," Ethan said at last. "Pain doesn't make me special." Harlan's mouth curled. "And it doesn't make you innocent." The porch went very still. Audrey's eyes flicked toward Ethan, not stopping him this time. Ethan stepped just a little farther into the doorway. "You fell down. Maybe hard. Maybe nobody came when they should have. I can believe that." Harlan's face worked. "But you chained her. You left a pup in a barn not fit for firewood. You let your own misery become weather for something smaller than you." The words came quieter than Ethan expected. That made them worse. Harlan stared at him. Then he laughed, but the sound had lost its footing. "Listen to him. St. Calloway of the Northwoods. House paid off, military pension, wife dead, so everybody lowers their voice around you. You think grief made you noble?" Ethan felt the old fury rise again, bright and simple. It wanted one step, one hand in Harlan's coat, one hard shove off the porch and into the snow. Behind him, Finn squeaked. A ridiculous sound. Tiny, nasal, deeply unimpressed. It cut the anger in half. Audrey said, "Harlan, you need to leave." "I'll file on him," Harlan snapped. "Trespass, theft, damage." "That barn was standing until he went in there." "It was collapsed when he documented it." "He can fake a video." Audrey's voice cooled. "You can make that statement formally if you want to add false reporting to the afternoon." Harlan's eyes slid back to the door, to Willow. The keys at his belt clicked once. Willow flinched. Ethan saw it. So did Audrey. That small sound did more damage to Harlan than any accusation could have. For a breath, Harlan looked almost frightened. Not for Willow, not for Finn, for himself, for the way the world had begun collecting little truths against him. Then the fear turned mean. "This isn't over," he said. "That dog knows my voice. She'll come when I call, once you people stop making a show of it." Willow did not move toward him. She pressed closer to Finn. Audrey stepped down one porch stair. "Go home, Harlan." He backed away, boots sliding in the snow, pride making every step heavier than it needed to be. At the edge of the porch light, he pointed at Ethan. "You're not the only man who lost things." Then he turned and walked into the blue-gray evening toward an old pickup idling crooked near the drive. Its muffler coughed, then roared. The taillights smeared red across the snow as he left. Ethan stood in the doorway long after the truck disappeared. Audrey came back up the steps. "You did better than I expected," she said. "That a compliment?" "For you, yes." He let out a humorless breath. Audrey glanced past him into the kitchen. "How's the pup?" "Angry." "Good. Angry things often survive, just to make a point." Ethan stepped aside and let her in. Willow watched the sheriff closely, but did not growl. That, too, felt like a measurement of the day. Mara arrived 20 minutes later with Nora Bell on speakerphone, because apparently trouble now traveled in groups. Nora's voice came through Ethan's phone, crisp and dry. Mr. Pike has the right to contest the emergency hold. Given tonight's behavior, we can request no contact conditions for the animal's pending review, but we need a clean record, no confrontations, no threats, no dramatic veteran porch justice. Ethan stared at the phone. Is that an official term? It will be if you inspire me. Mara, kneeling beside Willow with a thermometer, did not hide her smile. Nora continued. We'll need Mara's medical report, your original video, the collar, photographs of the injuries, statements from June Whitcomb and Tom Riley, and any additional history connecting neglect to Pike Farm. There will likely be a formal community hearing tomorrow or the next day. The municipal building has storm damage, so the church may be used as a temporary venue. A county judge can review remotely. A church, Ethan said. Audrey, who had just poured herself coffee without asking, glanced up. God has hosted worse paperwork. Mara checked Willow's temperature and murmured approval. Slight improvement. Willow was less impressed. She shifted only enough to keep Finn between her front legs. The puppy had wriggled partly out of the blanket and was now attempting to climb over the edge of the crate. His front half had ambition. His back half had no plan. Ethan crouched and put one hand in front of him. Finn bumped into his palm, snorted, and shoved harder. Mara looked over. Congratulations. He has selected mountaineering. He can barely stand. Many explorers begin with no qualifications. Finn beetushed again, managed to get one paw over the crate edge, and tipped forward into Ethan's waiting hand. His little body landed against Ethan's boot. For 3 proud seconds, he lay there as if he had conquered a continent. Then he began chewing on the leather lace. Ethan stared down at him. The absurdity of it rose before he could stop it. A small laugh escaped him. Not large, not free. More like a rusted hinge moving for the first time. Everyone heard it. Mara did not look up. Audrey pretended to study her coffee. Willow watched Ethan with amber suspicion, as if laughter might be a medical risk. Ethan stopped almost immediately, embarrassed by the sound. Mara said, "Careful. If you do that twice, people will expect personality." He shook his head and returned Finn to the crate. But the laugh remained in the room after it ended, shy and startled, like a bird that had flown through the wrong window and decided not to leave yet. Later, after Audrey drove back to town and Mara finished the last bandage change, the cabin settled into evening. The storm clouds had thinned, and moonlight lay across the snow outside in wide, pale bands. Willow slept more deeply now, though one ear still responded to every creak. Finn, exhausted by his expedition to Ethan's boot, had collapsed against her belly. Mara packed slowly. "You need sleep," she said. "I'll sleep when—" "If you finish that sentence with anything heroic, I'll prescribe shame." He leaned against the counter. "You always this warm with clients?" "Only the stubborn ones with military posture and poor towel selection." Ethan looked toward the living room. The old photograph of Lena and Abigail stood on the mantel, just beyond the glow of the stove. He had not noticed until that moment that Finn's crate sat directly beneath it. Mara followed his gaze. "I didn't mean to bring her up earlier," she said. "I know. She was kind. She was more than that. I assumed." The simplicity of the answer made it easier to bear. After Mara left, Ethan remained in the kitchen with no task to hide inside. That was dangerous. Work had always been his barricade. Tighten a screw, sharpen an axe, stack wood, shovel snow, fix the thing that could be fixed so the things that could not be fixed stayed quiet. but the house had run out of useful excuses. He opened the drawer beneath the clock parts, looking for a photograph. He did not know which one. Any one. Something with Lena's handwriting on the back, maybe. Something that could remind him of her voice without tearing the room in half. Inside the drawer lay envelopes, old receipts, spare keys, Abigail's college ID in a cracked plastic sleeve, and a small cedar box. Ethan had not opened the box in years. He sat at the table before he lifted the lid. The smell came first: paper, lavender, dust. Lena had kept small things, not valuable things. Movie ticket stubs. A recipe written by Abigail when she was 10, full of misspellings and confidence. A pressed yellow leaf. A photograph of Ethan asleep in a lawn chair with Lena's sunglasses on his face, clearly placed there while he was unconscious and defenseless. At the bottom was a folded sheet of notebook paper. Lena's handwriting covered it in blue ink, loose and slanted, the way she wrote when an idea had caught her before she found proper paper. Winter Porch Project, she had written at the top. Under it were notes. Blankets by the back door. Old dog food bin near mudroom. Emergency number list. Ask Mara K. about basic care. Maybe use shed if Ethan ever admits it has become a museum for broken tools. For old dogs, strays, the ones people call too much. A porch light means, wait here, you are not forgotten. Ethan read the last line twice. A porch light means, wait here, you are not forgotten. He sat very still. The chair across from him was empty. Lena's chair. He had never moved it, never used it, never let anyone else sit there. It had become one of the quiet rules of the cabin, so old and private that he no longer heard himself obeying it. Outside, the moon shone on the yard where Willow's bloody paw prints had crossed the snow before dawn. Inside, Finn breathed in tiny bursts beside his mother. Ethan looked at Lena's empty chair and understood, not all at once but enough, that he had mistaken closing the door for honoring the dead. He had thought solitude kept love pure, untouched by new risk. But perhaps some doors, left shut too long, did not protect memory at all. Perhaps they only kept mercy waiting in the cold. He folded Lena's note carefully and set it beside the half-repaired clock. Then he picked up his phone. Audrey answered with the tired patience of a sheriff who had already had too much Harlan for one day. "Tell me he didn't come back." "No," Ethan said. "What is it?" He looked toward Willow. She had opened her eyes, not wide, just enough to watch him. "I'll testify," Ethan said. "Publicly, if that's what it takes." A pause came through the line. "You sure?" "No." Audrey waited. Ethan looked at Lena's note again. "But Willow and Finn can't go back there because I prefer hiding." The sheriff's voice softened by a degree. "I'll put you on the list." "Tomorrow?" "Likely." He exhaled slowly. "All right." After the call ended, Ethan remained at the table, one hand resting near the note, the other near the old clock gears. For 3 years he had believed his life had narrowed to what was gone. Now, against his will and better judgment, it had widened by one wounded mother, one rude puppy, and a sentence written by a woman who had always known the porch light mattered. Across the room, Willow lowered her head again. Finn made a small dreaming sound against her fur. Ethan did not sleep much that night, but for the first time in a long while he stayed awake for something other than ghosts. The town hall had lost power during the storm, so Pine Hollow borrowed God's house for county business. That was how Sheriff Audrey Bell explained it when Ethan arrived at the little white church near the square and hesitated at the bottom of the steps. The church sat beneath a clean winter sun, its steeple bright against the pale blue sky, its roof still wearing a thick cap of snow. Pickup trucks and county vehicles lined the street. Pines stood along the side yard with white on their branches, and the shoveled path to the front door glittered with salt and ice. It should have looked peaceful. It did not. To Ethan, it looked like a place where silence had been summoned to testify. He stood beside Mara's veterinary truck with his hands deep in the pockets of his olive canvas jacket. Beneath it, his faded green camouflage shirt felt too familiar, too easy to hide inside. His wrist brushed the frayed paracord bracelet Lena had tied there years ago. Mara Kessler came around the truck carrying her brown medical bag in one hand and a folded blanket in the other. Her teal coat caught the sunlight in dark flashes, and her copper-brown hair had been pinned up with the practical violence of a woman who had no patience for loose strands during serious work. "You look like you're considering fleeing into the woods," she said. "I know the woods." "Yes, but the woods don't sign statements." Inside the truck, Willow lay on a padded mat with Finn tucked against her belly. The puppy had gained enough strength to complain about being warm, fed, moved, not moved, and occasionally about the general betrayal of gravity. Willow watched the church through the open side door, her torn ear angled forward, her amber eyes tracking every passing person. "She shouldn't be in there long," Mara said. "Only if Nora needs visual confirmation, and only if Willow can tolerate it." Ethan nodded. "You do not have to like this," Mara added. "You only have to not make it worse." "That your official medical advice?" "Today, it is civic medicine." Audrey met them at the church door. She wore her brown sheriff's parka over her uniform, a black knit cap tucked under one arm now that she was indoors. Her scratched steel thermos sat in her hand like a second badge. "Judge is online," she said. "Nora's setting up the file. Harlan's here." Ethan's jaw tightened. Audrey saw it. "Do not," she said. "I didn't say anything. You have shoulders. They speak." The church basement had been turned into a temporary hearing room. Folding chairs filled the space beneath low rafters. A long table had been placed near the front, covered not with altar linen, but with county folders, a laptop, a portable speaker, a stack of printed forms, and Nora Bell's small black camera. A screen on the table showed the face of County Judge Lorraine Sutter, an older woman with silver hair, square glasses, and the patient expression of someone who had spent decades watching people confuse volume with truth. She appeared from a courthouse office 20 miles away, where the heat worked and the roads were clearer. This was not a trial. Nora had said that twice already. It was an emergency evidentiary review and community statement session related to the temporary animal welfare hold. The legal words mattered, though they sat strangely beneath the church's wooden cross and the paper snowflakes still hanging from a winter charity drive. People filled the chairs in uneven clusters. June Whitcomb sat near the aisle, round shoulders hunched inside her pine-green cardigan, her red ledger clutched against her chest. Tom Riley sat 2 rows behind her, folding and unfolding the old wooden ruler from his pocket until Audrey looked at him and he stopped. A few townspeople had come because they had given statements. Others came because small towns had a hunger for judgment and called it concern. Harlan Pike sat near the front, sober enough to suffer clearly. He wore the same red and black flannel coat, though someone had made him wash, or at least stand near soap. His cap rested in his hands. Without the shouting, he looked smaller. Not harmless, just reduced. The keys at his belt were gone. Audrey had made him surrender them for the duration after Willow's reaction the night before. Still, Ethan could almost hear them. Harlan turned when Ethan entered. The 2 men looked at each other. Nothing useful passed between them. Audrey opened the session with a clear statement of purpose. Nora followed, standing beside the table in her navy animal control jacket, voice precise enough to keep emotion from spilling into places where law could not hold it. Subject animals are an adult female German Shepherd, now identified as Willow, approximately 5 years old, and one male German Shepherd puppy, now identified as Finn, approximately 6 to 7 weeks old. Both were removed from Pike Farm under emergency circumstances after Mr. Ethan Calloway documented immediate risk following a partial barn collapse. Ethan listened as his own actions became official language. It made them sound cleaner than they had been. Nora presented the failed call log, the video from Ethan's phone. The footage shook in places. His breath could be heard over the wind. The frozen bowl appeared on the screen. The chain, the gouged wood, the pocket beneath the collapsed boards where Finn had been trapped. A murmur moved through the room when the puppy's weak cry came through the speaker. Harlan stared at the table. Mara spoke next. She did not perform outrage. That made her testimony worse for Harlan. She described Willow's hypothermia, dehydration, split nails, raw restraint band, old bruising, and undernourished state. She described Finn's body temperature, bruised leg, exposure risk, and how survival had depended on the little pocket of straw and burlap beneath the fallen boards. These conditions are not consistent with a single unexpected storm event, Mara said. The barn collapse created the immediate emergency, yes, but the adult dog's condition suggests neglect and restraint over a longer period. Judge Sutter leaned toward her screen. In your professional opinion, Doctor, would returning the animals to that environment pose a risk? Yes, Mara said, a serious one. June Whitcomb was called after that. The room seemed to lean away from her shame, as if shame were contagious. She stood slowly, red ledger held in both hands. I run Whitcomb Feed and Supply, she began. Her voice trembled at the edges. Harlan's bought from me for years. Nora guided her gently through the entries. Dates, purchases, gaps, heavy chain, cheap feed. No puppy supplies. June confirmed each fact, then closed the ledger halfway and kept speaking though no one had asked. I saw the dog in October, she said. Willow, she was in the back of his truck, thin, watchful. I thought maybe she was just a farm dog, having a hard season. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. I told myself a lot of things because they were easier than picking up the phone. No one in the basement moved. June looked toward Ethan, then away. I'm sorry. Ethan did not know where to put her apology. It was not his to accept. Willow was outside in a truck, and Willow did not speak human regret. Tom Riley came next. He did not bring a ledger. He brought himself, which seemed harder. He stood with both hands at his sides, the old carpenter's fingers bent from years of work. His voice was low but clear. He had heard Willow barking late at night. More than once, he had heard Harlan shouting. Once he had heard a hard strike against the barn wall and a dog yelp. Judge Sutter asked, Did you report it? Tom looked at the floor. No, ma'am. Why not? His mouth worked. Because I decided not knowing for certain was the same as not knowing. The sentence moved through the basement like cold through a cracked window. Ethan felt it enter him too. He thought of Harlan at his door months ago, asking about the generator. He thought of the faint dog bark from the truck bed. He thought of turning up the radio. He had no statement prepared for that. No lawyerly language. No clean version. Audrey called his name. Ethan stood. The room shifted around him. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed. The judge looked out from the laptop screen with calm attention. Ethan had faced larger rooms, briefing rooms, military review boards, funeral halls. This small church basement was worse. He told the facts first because facts had edges he could hold. He described the scratching at the door, Willow's condition, her refusal to stay by the stove, the route through the trees, the collapsed barn, the failed phone call, the video, the puppy under the board. He did not decorate it. He did not make himself noble. He kept his voice level because if he did not, something in him might go where the room could not follow. Then Audrey asked, "Mr. Calloway, had you had any previous contact with Mr. Pike?" Ethan looked at Harlan. Harlan's eyes narrowed, uncertain now. "Yes," Ethan said, "in the fall. He came to my place asking me to look at a generator. What happened? I refused." The room was very quiet. Ethan looked at the table, at Nora's folders, at the laptop, at the scratch marks captured in a frozen image on the screen. "I smelled whiskey. I didn't want trouble. I told him to call someone else. After I shut the door, I heard a dog barking from his truck. I ignored it." Mara looked down. Audrey did not rescue him. "Good." "I can't say helping him that day would have changed this," Ethan continued. "Maybe it wouldn't, but I did what a lot of people did. I heard something I didn't want to be responsible for." A weight moved in the room then, not forgiveness. Something more useful, perhaps. Recognition. Harlan leaned forward, voice rough. "So now I'm the town's sin? Everybody gets clean if I'm dirty enough?" Audrey stepped toward him. "You'll have your turn." "I've had plenty of turns," Harlan snapped. "Everybody here watched my farm go under and cross the road like debt was contagious." Judge Sutter's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Pike, you may speak, but you will do so without threatening witnesses." Harlan stood. For the first time since Ethan had known him, Harlan did not look drunk. He looked worse. Clear enough to see himself and furious about the view. He denied things first. Said the storm had surprised him. Said Willow was a hard dog, always pulling, always trying to run. Said farm life was different from town people crying over house pets in sweaters. Said Ethan had trespassed and damaged his property. Nora asked about the chain. Harlan said it was for safety. Mara asked about the collar wound. Harlan said dogs got sores. Audrey asked when he last fed Willow. Harlan's answer wandered. Judge Sutter asked again. Harlan's mouth tightened. The room waited. Outside, faintly, a dog barked. Not Willow. Some town dog in a yard nearby. Still, Harlan flinched. The sound left him standing in the center of the church basement with nothing but his own breathing. His eyes moved to the stairs, toward the daylight above, toward the place where Mara's truck waited. "I didn't mean for the roof to come down," he said. No one spoke. "I was going to fix it." Tom Riley closed his eyes. Harlan's voice turned bitter, then cracked beneath the bitterness. "I was always going to fix something. Roof, fence, pump, myself." He looked at his hands. She kept trying to get loose. I thought if she ran, then that was the last thing gone. Everything leaves if it can. The sentence was ugly, also true in the way broken men sometimes told the truth while still standing on top of what they had broken. "So I chained her," Harlan said. June lowered her head. "And some days I fed her. Some days I didn't get out there." His face twisted. "Some days I couldn't stand the sound of another living thing needing me." Mara's face went hard. Ethan felt anger rise, but it no longer wanted to leap. It stood beside the grief now, quieter and stronger. Harlan looked toward Ethan. "You think I don't know that makes me low?" Ethan did not answer. Harlan nodded once, as if he had received an answer anyway. "I didn't mean to kill the pup," Harlan said. "Didn't know the roof would go." Audrey's voice was flat. "But you knew it was failing." A long pause. "Yes." That was when Mara brought Willow in. Not far, not into the crowd, only to the bottom of the stairs on a padded support sling with Finn tucked in a small carrier against Mara's side. Willow's paws were bandaged. Her body still looked tired, but her head was up. Sunlight from the open stairwell touched her yellow-black fur and made the ragged mark around her neck visible to everyone close enough to see. The room changed. People had looked at photographs. They had heard reports. They had watched a video. But Willow was not evidence when she entered. She was consequence. Harlan turned. For one terrible second, something like hope crossed his face. Maybe he believed possession had survived neglect. Maybe he believed a dog's memory worked the way a man wanted it to work, keeping title instead of pain. "Willow," he said. The sound of her name in his mouth made the dog stop. She did not bark. She did not lunge. She did not bare her teeth. She stepped back, only one step, because she was weak and Mara held the sling. But one step was enough. Her body trembled from shoulders to tail. Then she turned her head away from Harlan and searched the room. Her eyes found Ethan. Ethan had not meant to move, but he did. Just one step into her line of sight. Willow's ears shifted forward. Harlan saw it. The sight seemed to drain him from the inside. He sat down heavily on the folding chair behind him. It scraped against the church floor. No confession could have carried more weight than that single backward step. Judge Sutter removed her glasses. Nora spoke into the quiet, professional, but softer now. She recommended that the emergency hold remain in place, that Harlan be barred from contact with Willow and Finn pending investigation, that the case be referred for animal cruelty review, and that placement remain with Ethan Calloway under veterinary supervision and animal control checks. Harlan did not object, or perhaps he had no language left that the room would accept. Judge Sutter agreed to temporary placement. Her terms were clear. Willow and Finn would remain with Ethan during the investigation. Mara would supervise medical care. Nora would conduct scheduled and unscheduled welfare checks. Ethan would cooperate fully, avoid direct confrontation with Harlan, preserve all evidence, and allow community assistance where needed. Ethan heard most of it. The last condition landed hardest. Allow community assistance. The words sounded simple, polite, reasonable. To Ethan, they sounded like strangers on his porch. Judge Sutter looked at him through the screen. "Mr. Calloway, this is not a private rescue. This is a supervised placement. Do you understand?" He looked at Willow, who still watched him from beside Mara. "Yes," he said. "Can you comply?" 1,000 old instincts objected. Build a perimeter, control the door, trust no one with what matters, keep watch alone. Then Finn made a muffled little complaint from the carrier, furious at procedure, church basements, and possibly the concept of law. A few people laughed softly before they could stop themselves. Even Judge Sutter's mouth twitched. Ethan exhaled. "Yes," he said again, "I can comply." The hearing ended without applause. That was good. Applause would have felt obscene. People stood slowly, some avoiding one another's eyes, others reaching for coats with the solemn awkwardness of those who had witnessed not a victory, but an accounting. June approached Mara and asked what food Willow could tolerate. Tom told Audrey he could repair the broken section of Ethan's back fence if needed. Nora began packing documents with brisk efficiency, but Ethan saw her pause to photograph Willow one last time, not as evidence now, he thought, but as a record of survival. Harlan remained seated until Audrey told him it was time to leave. He did not look at Willow again. Outside, the sun had begun to lower behind the pines, turning the snow gold at the edges. Mara settled Willow back into the warm truck, laying the blanket around her. Finn curled against his mother's belly, already asleep, his dark stripe visible like a small ink line against the wool. Ethan stood by the open door. He did not reach in at first. Willow had given him enough to understand that trust was not a thing a man took because he wanted to feel redeemed. It was offered in fragments, and only after the world had been quiet long enough to prove it was not lying. So he waited. Willow looked at him. Her amber eyes were tired, still guarded, still carrying storms older than the one that had passed. Then she lowered her head by an inch. Permission. Ethan lifted his hand slowly and touched the top of her head between the ears. Only for a second. Her fur was warm. That was all. That was everything. He stepped back and closed the truck door gently, as if shutting it too hard might frighten the fragile new law of the world. Mara came around the side and looked at him over the roof. "You all right?" Ethan watched Willow through the glass. "No," Mara nodded. "Better answer." The church bell above them chimed once in the cold air, not for worship, not for mourning, but because wind had found the rope and moved it. Ethan looked at the white church, the gathered trucks, the people standing uncertainly in the snow, and the little shape of Finn sleeping beside his mother. For 3 years he had believed the first door to open would be the one that hurt most. He had been wrong. Sometimes the first door was only a church basement, a judge on a screen, a dog taking one step away from fear, and a man learning that protection could include witnesses. He had let the town in. Not all the way, not yet, but enough for the light to cross the threshold. The weeks after the hearing did not heal anything quickly. Winter in the Northwoods had never been known for speed. It loosened its grip one finger at a time. Snow still lay heavy on Ethan Calloway's roof. The lake remained locked beneath ice. The pines behind the cabin still carried white along their branches like old kings wearing tired crowns. But the cold had changed, or perhaps the house had. Smoke rose from Ethan's chimney every morning now, not in a thin, lonely line, but in a steady column that suggested someone inside had reason to keep the fire honest. The kitchen windows glowed before dawn. A shallow pan of water sat near the stove for Willotus. A small crate lined with clean blankets occupied the place beneath Lena and Abigail's photograph. A bell had been tied to the back door with red string after Finn discovered that barking at the door, the table leg, and his own foot produced inconsistent results. The cabin was no longer quiet in the old way. It breathed, grumbled, leaked warmth, collected paw prints, and smelled faintly of cedar smoke, coffee, medicine, wet fur, and puppy ambition. Mara Kessler came twice a week at first, then once, then whenever the patient decides to make my education feel inadequate. She arrived in her teal coat with her brown medical bag and a changing variety of expressions that meant Willow had improved, but Finn was about to become a problem with legs. Nora Bell came with forms, always forms. She brought placement documents, wellness check sheets, feeding schedules, vaccination timelines, inspection notes, and one clipboard so stern it seemed personally offended by disorder. Ethan learned that animal control did not run on emotion. It ran on carbon copies, signatures, dates, and Nora's refusal to let any loophole become a trapdoor beneath Willow. "I thought the military liked paperwork," Nora said one afternoon while checking the temporary kennel space Ethan had cleared in the mudroom. "We liked complaining about paperwork," Ethan said. "Different tradition. Then you'll adapt." Sheriff Audrey Bell stopped by when she could, usually with updates and coffee, occasionally with neither, which meant the update was not good. Harlan Pike had been formally charged with animal neglect and cruelty-related offenses. He was barred from contact with Willow and Finn. He had been ordered into alcohol treatment as part of pretrial conditions required to surrender animals on his property and made responsible for veterinary costs through county channels. Ethan did not celebrate. He had imagined in angrier moments that consequences would feel like justice striking a bell. They did not. They felt more like a fence being repaired in freezing weather, necessary, slow, and not nearly grand enough for the damage done. Audrey understood that without asking. "Boundaries are not revenge," she told him one morning, standing on his porch with her steel thermos tucked under one arm. "Sometimes they're the only way mercy doesn't get eaten alive." Ethan looked toward the living room window where Willow lay with Finn asleep between her front paws. "I don't feel merciful." Good. Feeling merciful too early can be vanity in church clothes. He almost smiled. Audrey took that as payment and left. People from town began coming too, though carefully at first, as if Ethan's porch were a frozen pond and no one trusted the ice. June Whitcomb left the first bag of food without knocking. Ethan found it before sunrise, set neatly beside the back door with a note taped to the top. For Willow and Finn. No need to answer. June. He stood over it for a long moment, irritated in several directions. At June, at himself, at the fact that apology could arrive as 40 pounds of lamb and rice formula and still be too heavy to lift easily. He carried it inside. Willow sniffed the bag from a cautious distance. Finn tried to climb it, failed, slid down, and bit the bottom corner as if punishing a mountain for being vertical. The next week, June knocked. Ethan opened the door to find her in a pine green cardigan under a heavy coat, cream hat pulled over her silver blonde hair, hands worrying the strap of her purse. "I can leave it outside," she said quickly. "You already knocked." Yes, that was poor planning. He looked at the bag of food by her boots. Then he stepped aside. June did not enter far. She stood near the door with her eyes on Willow, who had risen slowly from the rug. Willow did not growl, but her body angled in front of Finn. June saw that and pressed one hand to her mouth. "I'm sorry," June whispered. Ethan did not translate the words into forgiveness. He did not need to. Willow would decide what human sorrow meant to her, if anything. But he did say, "Set it by the mudroom." June nodded and obeyed as if the instruction were a privilege. Tom Riley came with tools instead of apologies. "I'm better at wood than words," he said, standing in the yard with a coil of wire over one shoulder and his brown work coat dusted with sawdust. "Back fence is weak. Won't hold once spring thaw starts." Ethan looked at the fence. Tom was right. "I didn't ask." "No." Tom waited. The old version of Ethan would have refused. Not because the fence did not need help, but because need itself had become an insult. Now Willow stood near the back step watching Tom with narrowed amber eyes, Finn attempting to drag a stick twice his length through the snow behind her. Ethan looked at the fence again. "I have spare posts in the shed," he said. Tom nodded once. "I saw." "You went in my shed?" "Door was open." "It wasn't. Latch is bad." Ethan stared at him. Tom took the folding wooden ruler from his chest pocket and opened it halfway. "I can fix that too." That was how the first repair day happened. It did not become friendship, not right away. Friendship was too clean a word for two men working in silence, both aware of what had not been done sooner. But they set posts. They restrung wire. Tom replaced the latch on the shed door. Ethan made coffee. Willow supervised from the porch with the solemn disapproval of a queen reviewing peasants. Finn helped by stealing one glove and falling into a shallow drift. The rescue came later, not as a decision announced by trumpets, but as a problem that kept putting on boots and walking into the yard. The first call came from Audrey. A senior hound had been found near the highway after the storm, half blind and too stiff for the county kennel's concrete floor. Could Ethan keep him overnight until a foster opened? "No," Ethan said. There was silence on Audrey's end. Then she said that answer was too fast. He looked at Willow, who was asleep near the stove, and at Finn, who had wedged himself under the cabinet and was growling at dust. "No," he repeated, less firmly. The hound arrived 2 hours later. His name, according to the tag on his collar, was Moses, and he carried the exhausted dignity of an elderly judge who had misplaced his courtroom. He slept in the mudroom for 1 night, then 2, then 4. Willow ignored him until Finn tried to chew his ear, at which point she corrected Finn with one soft rumble and glanced at Ethan as if to say the household standards were collapsing. Moses left with a foster family the following week. Ethan swept the mudroom after he was gone and found himself standing in the empty space longer than necessary. That night he took Lena's folded note from the kitchen drawer and read it again. Winter porch project, blankets by the back door, emergency number list. For old dogs, strays. The ones people call too much. A porch light means, wait here. You are not forgotten. He had read it many times now. The words did not hurt less exactly. They hurt differently. Like a muscle learning it could move again. By late February, the small shed behind the cabin had stopped being a museum for broken tools. Ethan cleared out cracked buckets, rusted hinges, old boards, a snowblower that had not run since Abigail was in college, and 3 boxes of things he had kept because grief often disguised itself as storage. Tom helped reinforce the walls. Mara made a list of supplies with the authority of a general planning an invasion of compassion. Nora inspected the ventilation, flooring, heat source, disinfecting station, and record system, then used the phrase conditionally acceptable as if granting Ethan a knighthood. June brought food bins. Audrey found a small emergency animal welfare grant the county had not used because no one had filled out the paperwork with sufficient stubbornness. Nora filled it out. Ethan suspected she enjoyed it. The shed gained insulation, a safe heater, washable mats, wire crates, hooks for leashes, a cabinet for basic supplies, and a motion light over the door. Ethan built a small covered extension off the back, just large enough for a dog to wait out of the snow until someone answered. When they painted the trim, Mara held up 2 color samples. Red or blue? Why are there color samples? Because sorrow has terrible taste if left unsupervised. Willow sat nearby in the sun, her coat thicker now, the black saddle glossy against deep gold. The raw band around her neck had healed, but the fur grew back unevenly, a permanent shadow. Finn, larger every week and filled with criminal confidence, attacked the paintbrush handle. Ethan looked at the samples. Red, he said. Mara nodded. Lena would have picked red. He looked at her. She wore red boots to the feed drive, Mara said. In mud. Like a woman declaring war on practicality. Ethan remembered the boots. The memory came bright and sudden, Lena laughing in the driveway, lifting one muddy foot, and saying a person should own at least one thing that made no sense but made the day better. He turned toward the shed so Mara would not see his face too clearly. Red, he said again. They painted the trim red. The name came on a morning when snow had begun to soften at the edges. Ethan stood on a ladder, screwing a simple wooden sign above the covered extension. Tom had carved the letters with his careful carpenter's hands. June had cried when she saw it, then blamed the cold. Nora had checked whether the sign blocked the motion light. Audrey had said nothing but stood with her arms folded, eyes gentler than her posture. Lena's porch, not Calloway Rescue, not Northwood Sanctuary, not anything large enough to invite speeches, just Lena's porch. A place with blankets, food, emergency numbers, heat, records, locks that worked, and a light that stayed on. Ethan climbed down. Finn immediately tried to eat a shaving of wood. No, Ethan said. Finn considered this, then attempted diplomacy by sitting on Ethan's boot. Willow walked to the sign and sniffed the lower edge of the frame. She had become stronger, though not untouched. Sudden metal sounds still made her flinch. Men speaking too loudly still sent her body between Finn and the door, but she slept through small noises now. She let Mara examine Finn without needing Ethan beside her every second. Once, during a storm, she had laid her head on Ethan's knee and stayed there until the thunder passed. Trust had not arrived like sunrise. It had come like thaw, dripping from eaves, loosening ice, making mud before flowers. Harlan's name did not disappear. Audrey brought updates as the case moved through county offices. Harlan remained barred from contact. Restitution for veterinary care was arranged through the sheriff's office. Ethan never saw the money directly. Harlan entered treatment because the court required it, not because life had become a hymn. There were no grand apologies, no dramatic forgiveness, no moment where Willow was asked to stand near him for anyone's comfort. That mattered to Ethan. Some mercy required distance. Some compassion had a locked gate. By March, the first true melt began. The lake still held its ice, but dark water appeared near the reeds. Snow slid from roofs in heavy sighs. The air smelled of wet earth beneath the cold. Birds returned in small skeptical numbers, hopping along fence posts as if judging whether spring had completed the paperwork. Inside the cabin, Finn grew into his paws badly. He attacked Ethan's left boot every morning with a devotion usually reserved for ancient enemies. He dragged socks under the sofa. He barked at the broom. He learned to climb the bottom stair and then forgot how to get down, howling as if abandoned on a mountain peak, while Willow watched from below with deep maternal disappointment. One morning, Finn stole Ethan's glove and ran straight into the leg of the kitchen chair. He sat down, stunned. Ethan looked at him. Finn looked back, offended by the chair's aggression. The laugh that came out of Ethan this time was not small. It filled the kitchen. It startled Willow so much she lifted her head. Then, seeing no danger, she settled again with a sigh. Finn, encouraged by audience response, pounced on the glove and tumbled sideways. Ethan laughed until he had to sit down. When the laughter faded, it left pain behind, but not the old hollow kind. This pain had warmth around the edges. It carried Lena and Abigail with it, but not as ghosts standing in the doorway. More like voices in another room, close enough to remember, gentle enough to let him keep living. The final snow came in April. It was light, almost ceremonial, falling through pale morning sun. Ethan opened the back door and stood aside. The porch boards had been repaired. 2 lanterns hung beside the door now. One had been Lena's, blue glass and brass, polished until it caught the light. The other was new, red-trimmed, hanging beside the sign for Lena's porch. Willow stepped out first. She paused on the threshold as she always did, checking the yard, the trees, the fence, the open morning. Her yellow-black coat shone in the soft light. The scarred band at her neck remained visible if one knew to look, but it no longer defined her. Her body was stronger now, her stance steady, her eyes still watchful, but no longer trapped inside fear. Finn launched himself after her. He hit the top step badly, slid, rolled into the snow, vanished for one spectacular second, then popped up with snow on his muzzle and outrage in every line of his small body. Ethan bent at the waist, laughing. "Gravity, again?" he said. "Still undefeated?" Finn barked at the step. Willow looked back at Ethan. Then she crossed the porch and pressed her nose into his hand. No urgency, no plea, no command, just contact. Ethan's fingers rested lightly against her head. Warm fur, steady breath. A living trust that had asked for nothing theatrical, only time. Behind him, the cabin glowed. On the porch, the 2 lanterns burned in the bright morning like small, stubborn stars. One for Lena and Abigail, one for every lost creature that might someday come scratching at the door. Ethan stepped down into the yard. Snow brightened around his boots, around Willow's paws, around Finn's chaotic tracks. The trees stood quiet at the edge of the property, no longer a wall keeping the world out, but a border through which help might come and go. The house behind him was not a fortress anymore. It was not a grave. It was a place with a porch light, a place that had learned the sound of need before dawn, a place that knew how to answer. Sometimes healing does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes as a weak scratch at the door, a trembling life asking to be seen, and a choice to open what grief has kept closed. Ethan did not forget Lena or Abigail. He simply learned that love does not end when loss enters the room. Love can become a porch light, a blanket, a bowl of water, a place where the wounded are not turned away. May we all notice the small cries around us before the snow covers them. And may God give us the courage to answer with kindness, even when our own hearts are still healing. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a time when love found its way back into your life. And if you would like more stories of loyalty, hope, and second chances, please subscribe. May peace find your home, and may your heart always keep one light burning.